everybody, welcome to GT Live. I'm Brandon Jones. I'm sitting right next to Ben Moore.
Yeah.
Who is a Civilization fan.
Very big fan.
And Civ Beyond Earth is our game and our guests. We have Will and David from Firaxis Games. Thank you so much for coming and talking about Civilization Beyond Earth Rising Tide, which you guys have been running around all over the place talking about. And
all over the
appreciate
place.
you taking the time coming in. Just really quickly before we get started, I just want to talk about your roles. You guys are both listed as lead designers, but I'm assuming you don't do exactly the same job. What specifically are your roles in the game?
Well, we have the same responsibility, and that's to hold the creative vision for a product. But at Firaxis, really what lead designer means is that we write code all day. So we sit in an office and write C++. That's our job. It's not very glamorous, but we've been lead designers at Firaxis for about 3 years together. And have been making games since college together. So we've, sort of learned the trade as a team. It's awesome to be able to make a game with your best friend. So
and a very exciting time to be at Firaxis, I imagine. There's
yeah,
a lot of big, new, interesting things that the team's been doing the last couple of years.
Yeah, we're really excited to be putting out Rising Tide. We had an awful lot of fun on BE. I know we were here last year talking about it. But as you guys know, XCOM 2 is coming out soon, so times are booming at Firaxis. It's a fun time to be at Firaxis.
And I think generally just to be in strategy games. I mean, it's a renaissance, basically, of awesome strategy games. These new channels that are opening up, new ways for people to make games and get them to people. It's a great market. So I'm glad I'm not making a shooter, I guess. There's so much innovation, in the strategy. Yeah, there's good shooters, but being in strategy games right now is just really cool.
So we're going to do the best job we can, pumping these guys full questions and trying to get all the details on the game. But if you guys have any specific questions that you have for them, we can direct them at the end of the show. And we'll be giving away codes for Goat Simulator, the PlayStation 4 version, which we thought was the perfect fit, for Civ Rising Tide. There's nothing, you guys are practically sister games. And of course, we'll be playing the game during, there's Goat Simulator right there, just in case you guys are curious. Just in case you didn't want to mistake it, for actual Civ, for rolling footage of Rising Tide versus Goat Simulator.
Well, you can classify that as a strategy game, I think. There's a lot of deep gameplay there in Goat Simulator.
As shown.
Apparently.
But specifically with Rising Tide, Ben, you talk a little bit about your Civ experience.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm outing myself here, but I'm kind of a later Civ fan. I didn't start until Civ 4. So I was going on, and then Civ 5 is the one that sealed the deal for me. Like, I dabbled in Civ 4, but I must have put over 500 hours in Civ 5, and I sort of missed Alpha Centauri and all that stuff, and so when they announced Beyond Earth, I was like, yes. Like, I love building a civilization, going through the eras, but I want to be in space. I want to fight aliens. I want to do all that stuff, and so I was extreme. I think it was my most anticipated game when they announced it. So.
And you were a fan. You reviewed it. You dug it.
Yeah, I did.
You're waiting for more. Just before we dive deep into it, Mr. Michael P. Huber is going to be in chat, and he's going to be taking questions. And he'll join us later. I think because I got Mr. Ben up here, I think we'll do questions at the end of the show from the couch if you don't mind.
Cool, yeah.
So get cozy, Huber, dig in.
I'm ready.
Brandon, I like this. During the live shows, it's the only time you call me Mister. I like that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Very nice. Yeah. No, it's just this level of respect up here is great.
I'm overly polite to everybody. I'll try to maintain that.
Yeah.
I apologize. I only respect you when the camera's rolling.
That's okay. Best time.
Well, certainly I respect you tremendously when I have to get someone up here to talk about Civ.
Sure.
Because this is extremely complex. I was telling you guys before I checked out Beyond Earth for the first time at PAX last year, and I was like, whoever was demoing the game, I'm like, why don't you play it? And then because you'll get through. We only have a limited amount of time, and you'll get right to the basics. So we have a limited amount of time here. Before we ask specific questions, I mean, what's your main sell going into this week, showing people off? I imagine a very specific slice of Rising Tide. What do you want people to know about the game?
It's really difficult to show off the expansion in such a short period of time because it's not like Civ 5 expansions that have sort of touched specific parts of the game. Like if you think about the 2 expansions for Civ 5, we had a middle game, late game improvements. But Rising Tide really touches the entire product from the very first turn to the very end. The new diplomacy system, aquatic gameplay, artifacts, 2 new biomes, new aliens, all of this new stuff, hybrid affinities. So from the very first turn, it's really brand new.
Mm-hmm. Now, diplomacy was a problem you had.
It is, yeah.
with Beyond
It's also
Earth.
A lot of people did.
Everybody had that problem.
So yeah, nothing original for Ben Moore. I mean, everybody had that issue.
Everybody did have that issue. Yeah.
But specifically, I was actually on the wiki page today, and it actually said specifically, it's like Ben Moore did not like that diplomacy on
did
the
it?
wiki page. Yeah.
Okay.
We did it for you. We changed it.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Well, that actually was one of my other questions before we can get specifically into how diplomacy was changed. Was how much of this is a correction or maybe adding things that you couldn't add to the game before, and how much of this is new content? Do you kind of look at expansions as kind of like a 50-50 chance to do both things, to bring new stuff and correct other stuff that you might have wanted to change from the original launch?
Well, it's always a continuum. Like it's whatever's right for the particular product. So like with the Civ game, there's so many things in the game, so many moving parts. And inevitably, when the game comes out and fans like Ben get their hands on it, they say, well, some things that are working for me are awesome, some things not so much, and we have no shortage of ideas of ways that we want to improve the game. So there's plenty of that in the expansion. But for us, the real exciting thing is adding to the game. Like, as you said, I'm really excited for Civilization in Space. The concept of Civ in the future has so much potential that there was tons of ideas after Beyond Earth came out of like, how could we take it further? What more could we do? And we got a lot of positive feedback from fans saying, I like what you've done, please do more. So I'd say this game trends pretty heavily on the new stuff. Like we've got these 4 new leaders and all kinds of new military units that allow you to do things that you could never do in any Civ game prior. The whole aquatic gameplay thing, playing on the oceans, totally transforms the way the game plays. Tackling diplomacy to the extent that we've done, it's something that no Civ game has really tried to that extent. So we were really gunning hard to push this game, to push it, to be ambitious with it, to be bold with it.
What's cool about Rising Tide is normally when I play expansions or DLC or even big patches, it's like they sort of accomplish one of these 3 things. Either it's like, okay, we're going to fix all the problems that people have with the game, or we're just going to add new stuff, or we're going to kind of give it a bigger identity, and really cement what is this game about. And I feel like Rising Tide does all 3 of those things really well. Like they were saying, it's not just like we tweak some things over here. It is a total reevaluation of some of these core systems, and that's really cool. Plus all of these new ones that interact with the old ones in really interesting ways. So,
how big is this expansion compared to other stuff that you guys mentioned you've been in the team with? But you said you've been there for 3 years. I don't know how long.
It depends on how you count. We've been associated with Firaxis for 6, 7 years, something like that. We took a break and went to Big Huge Games for a little while, and then came back. That's a story for another day.
What's the size of Rising Tide relative to other
the size of Rising
expansions?
Tide? I would say that if you're going to compare it to a product we made before, compare it to Enemy Within. We really took a lot of inspiration for how that product changed the identity of XCOM. So if you're going to spend $25, $30 on an expansion, to me as a player, I want that kind of transformative experience. I want to be playing a new game that's like the old game. So that's I think a good comparison.
I have 2 very key questions. You mentioned that you guys have been making games together since college. How often do you get in fights? How intense are these fights? And how do you resolve them?
We're like an old married couple.
Okay.
Like, Dave came in and he was grouchy today, so I'm grouchy this morning. I don't know.
Pouting.
It's not just. I think it's not just us in the room either.
Yeah, thankfully.
We have this great team at Firaxis, and it's a collaborative effort. It's not just our vision or our implementation. It's we get to work with some of the smartest people in this business. Certainly, experts in making strategy games, and we've learned a ton. So. We have these issues, but we sort of work them out together, and we actually rely on our community a lot too. I mean, I think a lot of the things you're seeing in Rising Tide is response to things that the community, wanted to see, mods or, forum posts or tweets. Like we read all of those things. So,
it's fine. I mean, we're professionals on the one hand, and we've known each other so long that we know when it's serious and when somebody's just like, on the wrong side of the bed. Plus, it takes a long time to make a game, so there's no like snap decisions. There's no like, if you don't see this my way, I'm walking out the door. It's because like just go home, come back the next morning, and be like, yeah, I thought about what you said, and it sounds like a good idea. Things are pretty chill.
Okay.
When when you're on a tour like this, when you're going around and you're showing the game off to people, are you really just kind of like getting the message out there? Are you at a point right now where you can take any advice or any feedback from people's early impressions, of just checking out the game this week?
Well, one of the great things about, one of the best and worst parts of doing a press tour is that you, as designers, we don't get to play the game that much.
Right.
Like our producers get to play way more than we do, our testers certainly. But we get to actually sit down and play the game quite a bit. We're like, oh man, I want to go back to the office and change that, or I like this part a lot. And we get to see impressions from you guys. At this point, we're almost done. We're in the home stretch. We're not going to change too much, but we're always looking for feedback. Firaxis has a history of patching the product after we launch it. They're live games for us, so we continue to refine them after they're out the door.
Speaking for me personally, at this point in the project, I really only want to hear people say good things. So if you're
just block
disappointed in the
everything
game,
else out.
if you're just disappointed in the game, I don't care. I'm gonna pretend that didn't. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, we're in that sort of sweet spot between mostly being done with the game and actually launching, where we just get to enjoy kind of what we've tried to make, see how people are reacting to it, and if there are like deep concerns or ideas that people have, we'll remember those. Opportunities to patch the game will hopefully come our way. We definitely look forward to a lot of robust fan feedback to make it the game that they really want. So don't hold back.
And we don't turn it off. Like the seeds for the new diplomacy system, for example, we came up with that while we were in Germany at Gamescom. We hadn't launched the game yet. We were talking about, we even then knew like diplomacy.
We were on this tour last year. We were in London actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it was in London, right?
That was actually one of my later questions, was when do you turn that off? But I guess you can't. You're just kind of always.
It's always there, right?
A
game like Civ,
possibly to your own detriment, because you might have some secret list somewhere. You're like, oh, we're never getting to this stuff because there's just no time, or it's just not. Like we're saying, it depends on the product. There's certain things we want to focus on. So diplomacy, let's get into it. From my limited Civ experience, I'm a complete pushover. Like, if somebody got upset with me over something, I'd be like, I'm sorry. Take my country, please. Like,
we should play multiplayer Civ together.
Right? Yeah. I'm sure that would work out great for me. But yeah, whether it's RPGs or strategy stuff, like I'm always bowing to superior forces. But from what I remember, one of the issues that you had was stuff happens. Long story short, stuff happens and you don't know why. It's like I don't really know what happened there. I don't know how that broke down. It's one thing if you intentionally, double cross somebody, but you obviously want to set stuff like that up. Was that the concern, and how did you address it?
That was absolutely one of the concerns. There were a couple concerns. We took a step back, like I said, when we were tooling around London, took a step back, looking at what diplomacy was for, what it did. And, we're programmers, so we look at it in terms of inputs and outputs. And the input was very simple. There weren't a lot of choices. The outputs were also similarly very simple in Civ 5 and in Base Beyond Earth. Which is to say, declare war, open borders, allied, whatever, and trade yields. Trading yields was made better by the trade system, which works really great for that. And then that doesn't leave a lot for diplomacy to actually do. And in Beyond Earth, we sort of wholesale took the Civ 5 diplomacy model over, and it just doesn't work because our characters are fictional. You don't come into the game with an idea about how Gandhi might behave, or George Washington, or Montezuma. We made up our characters from whole cloth, and the system didn't really provide a platform for them to express themselves. So that was a goal. Another goal was to make the AI more transparent. So you want to know why they've backstabbed you or double-crossed you or whatever, and have some agency over that, be able to control and game that. So we wanted to put a game in the place of this very lightweight system that had existed before. So that's where diplomacy came from.
Yeah, one of the things that I like is just that transparency. You have this new currency, this diplomatic capital, and it's this thing that you accumulate over time and then you spend, and it's just so much more straightforward than being like, hey, I want to do this thing with you, and you say no, and I don't know why. It's like, no, I have the ability of acquire this capital, I can do this thing. I can't do all of these other things as a result, but I know that very clearly I can commit to this one thing.
So are these affecting relationships you're going to build in Rising Tide, or this is going back and changing? So for someone like myself who has not played Beyond Earth yet, this is clearly like the best time to do it. Like if So I'll be encouraged not to just try to like get to the Rising Tide content as fast as I can. I really want to go back and explore the whole experience.
Yeah, I mean, we really focused on making the entire experience of the game change with diplomacy. So, one of the big goals is diplomacy is often viewed as kind of an optional system. Like, if you're about war, if you're about just your own civ, it's easy to ignore what the other leaders are doing. And we sort of have to acknowledge that that's the case, but we want diplomacy to be relevant to the whole game, so that even if you're not interested in like really digging in and making relationships, it's still a powerful tool. There's a lot of opportunity there, and really wanted to entice players in. Say you're missing out. There's all this power to be had, these like ways to win the game that you can find in diplomacy if you try, but still not leave you out in the cold if you're just want to play it cool. So if you when you play Beyond Earth Rising Tide, just play your game. Play your game, and you will find, if we've done our jobs right, you will find that diplomacy is calling to you and saying, hey, that problem you've got, there's a way to solve it if you make friends with this guy. Or this guy over here, he's been watching what you're doing and he likes it. You might have an opportunity to become allies. Or this guy over here doesn't like what you're doing. You better pay attention to him because he's getting angrier, and it's broadcasting that there might be a war in the future. So there's all these moving parts of diplomacy that are commenting on and touching on your regular game so that it's integrating itself into your experience in a very natural way.
Does that feel natural, Ben?
Yeah. I definitely, as I was playing it at the preview event, I felt like I wanted to engage more in diplomacy because of the huge overall and how much they refined it and how much they expanded upon it and how much easier it was for me as a player to understand. You always want to engage things into things more in video games when you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I feel confident about these decisions because I know about the result they'll produce. So, but you were talking about these fictitious characters that you made, and that's kind of an alien thing in some ways to civilization, and they're all trying to colonize this planet, and you have a reason why each one of these different factions are going to this planet, and it's actually like pretty elaborate. How do you sort of present that information to the player, and how did you come up with these stories, that sort of thing?
Well, world building. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It is sort of a foreign concept for Civ.
Yeah. And
it's not something that we've had to do before. Like you have this idea of history, sort of the elementary school textbook version of history in your head. Everybody carries that around. That's what we count on people bringing to a game of historical Civ. There is no such thing for Beyond Earth. And in the base game, we were very concerned with not trampling on the player's ability to tell their own story, not making our story supersede theirs. But what we did instead was sort of remove the world building, the foundation that the player needed to build their story. So we tried to add new content and new systems to this game that let our story come through, to show more of that content. The quest system has been expanded, so there are more quests, variations of the quests that were already there. The new artifacts system is a great way to reward the player and to give a nice vehicle for that kind of content. And of course, the diplomacy system is this wonderful stage for these characters to speak to you, and they have a really deep catalog of things to say. So when we're trying to decide, when the code's deciding what line to say to you, it's looking at what the fear and respect values are, what you've done in the last little while, what your affinity is, like all of these different factors, and there's lines, a big database of lines that they can say that'll give you hints as to what they're thinking about you, or what their backstory is. So it's a really great way to solve narrative problems mechanically. And again, this is like why strategy games are so exciting for us, because we can't just tell the story with a cutscene. We have to put a mechanic in the game to solve that problem. And I think the diplomacy system does a really good job.
Yeah, it was something that I hadn't experienced in a Civilization game before. You have this new civilization, and as they're coming to the planet, they don't have the cryosleep like all of the other factions do. And so the people that are arriving on the planet, they're actually like descendants of the original group that left. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I like that story. I'm picking them because I'm attached to them in this way. Whereas before it was like, yeah, I like George Washington. I want to trample people as George Washington, so I picked him.
I just finished Aurora by Kim Stanley Robinson. I don't know if you guys are sci-fi readers, but it's the same thing, like how a society changes when they're in a tin can for 7 generations. So Al-Falah is our Middle Eastern leader, is just that. Like the people that set foot on that planet have not seen a planet before. They're not the same people that left. So their whole culture is built around sort of being surviving, right? Surviving in space. So that's projected into their unique mechanical advantage. It's cool. Like the city processes, developments are their thing. So yeah, we love Al-Falah, and she looks awesome. She does. Just looks awesome. Oh man.
Maybe this is a very inappropriate / offensive
I hope so.
comment, because like you said, you want the players to be able to tell their own stories, and I'm all about that. I really appreciate that style of design, but at the same time, if you made a graphic novel or a book about her, I would read that.
If anybody wants to write one,
right? Well, and actually, before we move on to talking about what countdown we're gonna be doing this week, is that you mentioned you're setting up, the whole new narrative, around all of these characters and around this world, and just the whole, around the whole venture of all of these, the whole franchise moving out into space. Not to talk too far in the future, but this is obviously something you guys want to stick with for a little while. You want to bring some more expansions to the game, possibly build off of these characters and do more stuff with that in the future. Would it be really difficult to just totally do something else with Civ moving forward, or you're like,
I don't know.
Stick around with these characters for a while?
It's both like wonderful and awful because we've got so much enthusiasm for this topic. Like to make a sci-fi Civ was really a dream for the two of us. And we put virtually everything we could think of into base BE. And then when it was done, we found that there was more. We found that our excitement was not consumed, it was enhanced. And it was like bolstered by the excitement of the fans. There's just a tremendous enthusiasm generally around the idea. So we had all these new ideas to put into Rising Tide. And now Rising Tide is about to come out. Mostly I'm thinking about vacation. But
that's good.
As soon as it's over, I'm
right.
already starting to think about what else could we do with this premise. I'm like, we don't know what opportunities are going to come down for us. Like, we don't know what the future of Rising Tide is or the future of Beyond Earth is in general, what our particular project will be next. But I really hope we get to keep working in this space, in this premise, because just the level of excitement that just comes out of it, like, is self-reinforcing. It is an incredibly fun, really cutting edge, really beautiful concept, the strategy game of the future. So I really hope we'll be back here before long next year, maybe, with another game in the Rising Tide or Beyond Earth space or something like it.
Yeah, we're not announcing a new product or anything.
Right.
But you can rest assured, Firaxis will always have a historical Civ offering. This is our bread and butter. This is, Beyond Earth is not replacing historical Civ or anything like that. You can think of it as sort of a sister branch, a branch in the tree, right? And we've talked about this a lot, how we get to do things, game design things in a sci-fi Civ that we just can't do in a historical Civ. So it's very rich ground, and we hope to continue to work there.
Well, I'm excited. There's so much stuff to talk about. We're gonna change course really quickly, and we should go to the control room and talk to Mr. Ian Hank. We have not introduced. Hi, Ian. How's the controls working? We had some internet issues before we started the show.
The internet didn't work,
but we're here.
Now
the internet's working. The TriCaster's working.
Yeah.
You're working.
6 minutes late. I have a question.
Uh-oh.
I know it's hard for you guys to hear me, but like, what if you did a historical Civ that ran all the way through Beyond Earth? Just like make it, you leave the Earth and then go here.
Well, you kind of do. I mean, you can build the Apollo project in historic Civ, and that's one of the ways that you go to Alpha Centauri.
Right.
Right. But I think it'd make a great mod.
Somebody
wants to mod it. We'll tweet about it.
That's code for saying we're not going to do that.
Yeah, if anyone comes up with the idea or the question of like how the suggestion of how you guys could have the time and the resources to produce some of these projects, like a novelization, or cramming both Civ franchises into one franchise.
Yeah. It'd be fun.
That would be the preferred question.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, I have an idea. And you're like, yes. I've had that idea as well.
Sorry, Brandon.
But but that's what that's why we want to have guests on, is we just want to tell them all our pie in the sky dreams for all this stuff. Really quickly, want to talk about the top 10 that we're doing this week, and I'm good that I got you on the mic, Ian, because you have a concern with the countdowns that we do.
Dude, all of them.
So
every single week, countdown, we're like, oh, this idea we can all get behind and is exciting, and then like these dweebs put a bunch of rules on it, like, oh no, that's a wolf.
I think I'm the main dweeb. I will accept all dweebiness here.
It's you and blood usually.
Right.
But it's like, oh no, that's a wolf. Oh no, that's an anthropomorphized humanoid that looks like a dog. And I'm like, God damn it, just do a fun list.
But since we're opposed to having fun here at Game Trailers, this week, as Ian teased, we're doing the top 10 dogs. But the trick is, just in quick my defense, I'm not saying Ian's wrong and I'm right, or vice versa. But the trick with countdowns, when you see a countdown, it's like, I wonder. To me, when I see a countdown, I wonder what their rules are. Like, I watch a Screw Attack countdown because I know they don't necessarily have rules. Like, we did the top 10 Wii games, and they picked Netflix for one of them. You're just like, that's Screw Attack.
Yeah.
You know what would be really funny though? Ian, you are a video editor. You can make whatever you want. It'd be funny if the night countdown went up, you told no one, and you had Ian's version of
The
top
correct
10 whatever.
countdown.
Yeah,
Well,
and you VO it and
And then if
everything.
that
bit of
video
a-
beat the other one in views, then we can
a bit of a tease.
right.
I influenced a little Easter egg that might appear at the end of the
Oh yeah, there's definitely an Ian Hank suggestion that'll make it onto the countdown. Might not be an entry. And what isn't an entry, if we want to get specifically into rules, we won't talk about dogs for 20 minutes. I swear, guys.
That's
fine. Is we're not including anything that's not a dog. That's not like, so if it's a wolf, it doesn't count. If it's like a humanoid thing that looks like a dog, it doesn't count. And QB roll, one of the main people that we realized right off the top of the gate that could not be on the list was KK Slider from Animal Crossing.
This is ridiculous.
Because again, it's tough. It's like, to me, the dog that can play guitar, I mean, that beats dog meat. That beats you name it. That beats any dog ever, because those dogs can't play guitar, because Chop doesn't play guitar, because Chop is actually a dog. And so that to me was the line. Like, okay, we should either not have that line or we should establish it. Ian's argument is that we should not have that line. My argument is I'd be curious to see that
Just
list.
make a fun.
Because that
Also,
would be
this B-roll
different.
is
And we
just
easily,
credits. What is this?
easily came up with actual 10 dogs, like 10 dogs that look like dogs, they bark like dogs, they're dogs. So it's tough. I mean, it's certainly you can't envy someone in my position who has the difficult have to make the difficult decisions like this.
That's true.
To not put a dog that I dearly love,
I mean,
who sings tunes that I can hum from
just-
memory. It's like, how can you reject this man? How can you, or this dog man, this man dog?
What if he's just an evolved dog, right? Like, what if Animal
Right,
Crossing
what
just
if
takes
this-
place
what if there
thousands
was
of
an
years later?
apocalypse? Animal Crossing is
in the
after Beyond Earth,
Yeah,
right.
it's in the
Way
Beyond
after.
Earth.
And then,
yeah.
this is.
I want to make a mod where
surprise ending
KK
of Rising
Slider is
Tide. You
in
stumble upon the
Beyond
whole,
Earth. Yeah.
dog person.
This is some high octane B-roll here, Brandon.
I know. It's intense, man. I'm telling you.
My God.
In case you wanted to know the development staff of the DS version of Animal Crossing, there
Here
you
you
go. I
go.
have it right there.
Here you
I like
go.
So there are other, one of the, I broke your heart, David, when you first came on the show. You mentioned Max from Sam and Max, or Sam. Sam is next.
yeah.
You mentioned Sam from Sam and Max. I was like, oh, sorry, no, that's a.
You got my pick though, Interceptor.
It's Interceptor.
Gotta have Interceptor
Stealthy
on the
Interceptor
list,
snuck in on
absolutely.
that list somewhere. I
It's a good
threw out a
choice.
couple.
And
that
like
probably spoiled more on this list than we
Amaterasu,
should
they're
have.
like, it's a wolf god. Eh.
Right, Amaterasu.
Okami.
Yeah, is it wolfish?
Like you can
wolfish thing
paint with your
necessarily?
tail, man.
So it's tough. And also, sometimes we do countdowns. I'll do a Google search. And I'm like, I'm pretty proud of that countdown. No one's really done that countdown before. I've seen top 10 dogs a lot. So wanted to try to
Everybody
make this
did
a
it.
different list. Get some actual canines in there that people aren't necessarily familiar with. Elise Willems had a really good suggestion that I don't think I've ever seen on a top 10 dog list
It's
before.
the best one.
It's potentially the best one from her expertise in dogdom in real life and in the digital sense. Hubert, you want to chime in on this at all? Are we out of our minds?
They're
KK
talking
Slider
about-
in there.
They're asking why we just didn't do top 10 whales.
Is that the new one?
I'm getting
Whales?
hyped on that. I like it.
Fire whale.
Top 10
So we got
whales.
Link's Awakening.
Fire whale.
Yep.
It's Dishonored. There's some whales.
Bismarck was
I really-
a whale summon.
I really
any,
love
any
Huber's
whales,
ads.
guys. Any
Right.
well, we got we'll be getting into the oceanic parts of Rising
Yeah,
Tide
right,
later
yeah.
on in the discussion. Any killer whales coming at you in Rising Tide?
Bismarck
Spoilers?
is a good pick too. I'm
Okay.
in Final Fantasy VI land right now.
Yeah, I know. You brought,
It's
yeah.
really like I'm gonna go home and play that.
You'd be surprised. We did top 10 villains. Kafka was on that list. We did top
course.
10 jerks. Again, Kafka. FF6 comes up as many times as I can possibly shoehorn it into.
Guys,
countdown.
we were talking about the two of us not getting along. There is a schism between us, and that is that David has never played Final Fantasy VI.
I'm sorry. You
That's
gotta
fine.
leave.
That's okay.
Never
Have to
played.
leave now.
I didn't.
can't-
I haven't played Beyond Earth. You know what I mean? We got to. It's as a gamer, you got to pick and choose your battles.
I'm gonna find a copy of Final Fantasy VI in this office. I'm gonna give it to you, and I'm gonna say, "Hey, man, we're not gonna review Rising Tide. So you play this."
Do I have to
game."
submit a book report?
I'll endorse
Yeah.
this. Yeah, I mean,
But Rising Tide's an expansion. What are we talking? I mean, I don't know if you want to put a number on it, but I mean, you're looking at least 40 hours with Final Fantasy VI. I mean, if you rush it.
at least.
Can
Yeah.
we cue some Final Fantasy VI B-roll, please, Ian? Final Fantasy VI. I didn't.
yeah.
Has
let me-
surprisingly just named like 10 legitimate whales. I'm really.
And you're the one monitoring chat right now. Write these down, and we will legitimately do the top 10 whales. I'm curious if we put top 10. Ironically,
Be
the
good.
question on GT Time tomorrow that Kyle will ask the new Super Seat members is,
Spoilers.
what is the best animal? And the first person to answer that question said dog, and
He got-
Kyle just immediately silenced them,
Yeah.
which he's not supposed to do,
His-
and said,
his
"Why don't you do
advanced-
something cool like whales?"
Yeah,
So
his
maybe
advanced
whales are cooler than
series of
dogs. We
brain
will check both of those
problems came
countdowns.
out.
And we'll do the top 10 whales the next time you guys are on to talk about the next expansion.
Save it for
Beyond Earth. So we are at the midpoint of the show. We're going to cut really quick, extremely quick. Blink, and you might miss this trailer. Speaking of awesome expansions coming to awesome PC games, The Witcher 3 is getting a new expansion called Hearts of Stone, and it has a very brief but very awesome, badass trailer. Check it out.
Greetings, Geralt. Do you want my help? It's a deal.
All right, we are back. I told you it was a very brief trailer, but it very badass. I'm looking forward to that. So, okay, we have so much more to talk about. I mean, I have questions. Is there anything like what have we missed? We talked about diplomacy. We talked about factions briefly. There's new factions coming to the game. What are we not getting into that we need to discuss in Rising?
I think my favorite thing in Rising Tide, or at least right now, my favorite thing, artifacts. Those are the
Yeah.
you guys touched on them earlier, but if you kind of want to maybe explain those a little bit more in detail, I'm sure you could do a much better job than me. So, yeah, they're
You're doing a pretty good job.
okay.
I brought you on to ask the
Okay.
gritty questions. You know, I want you to see the AC unit isn't working today, so you might
Yeah.
see them sweat for that reason. But I want them to stew. You know, I want them to be like, oh man, good question.
yeah.
And it's so far just like I love that as well. That's great. It's like, come on, you gotta get the hard hitting questions.
Hard-hitting
We
questions.
gotta get in there. What's up with these artifacts, guys?
Whoa. Sweating bullets.
Well, I mean, they're things. They're objects, strange things that you find on the planet. It's a whole new system we put in mostly so we could put really cool sci-fi content in there and give the player rewards in the form of story and some power. So when you do stuff out on the planet, when you find resource pods, you kick over alien nests, dig up stuff with your explorers, you can find these artifacts, and they could be extremely rare, powerful Earth devices that you maybe left behind, strange organisms or things from the alien world, or mysterious objects left by the mysterious progenitors. And depending on what you find and what combinations, you can break them down, which is to say research them for an immediate gain, which I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can save them up, hoard them into a set, cash them in all at once, and get a truly unique thing, like the ability to build a game-exclusive building or wonder, as well as some other powerful benefits that could be only yours for having found these particular artifacts.
The reason I love this so much is because before in base Beyond Earth, I mean, there were cool things you could do with the Explorer. You could do expeditions, you could scout, you could do all these things. But eventually, I reached a point in my game where I kind of explored, and I set my Explorer on auto, and I just felt like in Rising Tide, in my time with it, the Explorer was a lot more valuable because there were more things to discover, and it really hammered home the fact that this planet has a history. There are people that have been here before you. You know, all of the artifacts have like a little blurb about them, and it went a long way in making this place feel more alien and strange, and like I was truly uncovering something. I like that a lot.
So if I've completed Beyond Earth, I played this game a ton, and I got to the end content. You know, I even maybe did like a second run through all the way through. And I pick up Rising Tide. Is there going to be a clear starting point for me to start out? Again, this is me just being ignorant about civilization as a whole. Like, how do if I have finished the game, or maybe in midway through a playthrough, is that like a concern of yours? Like how players are going to address all of the new content? Like, oh, maybe I should start over because I might not want to continue from this midpoint with all of this new stuff being added.
You actually have to. You have to start
Okay.
over. Unfortunately, because the game has changed so much, the saves from base game Beyond Earth are not compatible with with the expansion. But it's a strategy game, so it's a collection of systems that we throw in and then simulate, right? So there's no like, how do I get to the content in the expansion? It's not like a linear adventure game or something like that. You will experience it from the first turn all the way to the end. You'll start discovering artifacts right away. Once you start to meet new civs, you'll get pulled into the diplomacy system. The new leaders are there. So it's all there. You'll know it's a different game right away.
Do you like that, Ben, as opposed to like other games that get expansion? So we were just talking about, expansion coming to Witcher, and that, is kind of more, from my ignorance, action adventure standpoint, like those are the games that I typically play. I'm used to just like, oh, this island appeared out of nowhere. I'm not going to now go to this.
Yeah.
Whereas this sounds like a complete overhaul, of the whole game. Just like adding new systems, tweaking old systems. Is that your preferred type of expansion? Something that
I don't know.
brings
I
you
mean,
new stuff and goes back and makes the old stuff new again.
It's like they were saying. It's just a totally different type of game, right? When I play Witcher, when I sit down, it's like, okay, I'm going to it's this journey that I'm going on. I'll make a little bit of progress on that journey. Whereas when I play Civ, I have completely different expectations. I have completely different wants. It's like, okay, I'm going to play through a full game of Civ tonight. How am I going to play differently? What decisions am I going to make? So I just go in expecting different things. I don't know if it's my preferred. Okay. As I have gotten older, Brandon, video game stories have generally impressed me less and less. So I tend to get more attached to systems and mechanics and things like that. And so as I've gotten older, strategy games have been more and more appealing to me. I don't know if I would say I prefer it over everything else, but when you say, "Hey, we completely retooled Beyond Earth," I'm like, "Yes, awesome! I don't even need a story. Like, let me just. I like it. I like that it's there, but the other stuff is just as exciting."
So, I mean, now that we're talking about the story, before we get into the water stuff, because we haven't really touched on that a lot, what is the story going into Rising Tide? Is there a continuation of the narrative that is the reason the tides are rising? That's the reason why the story is advancing in this direction.
Yeah, of course. The story of Beyond Earth is it's more of a myth. And we treat it like a myth. Like the people that get to the New World may know a little bit of what happened to Old Earth and why they left or whatever, but the myth is there's this catastrophe called the Great Mistake, and that was followed by some scientific advances that allowed humans to leave the planet and a need to do so. So we left in what was called the seeding. So that was the original 8 colonists that came to the new planet. The 4 new factions had to stay behind. So they dealt with all of the shit that was left behind by the original people that fled. So they're a little bit rougher around the edges. They're more scrappy and kind of hardcore. And one of our mandates for the expansion was to really push the sci-fi angle in the game. We certainly didn't want to make the beginning of the game seem implausible. We always wanted to ground that in reality, but these new leaders are sort of more out there. So Arshia Kishk Al-Falah, the Generation Ship, or Duncan Hughes, the sort of blue-collar dock worker turned politician that wears a Sega Genesis for a belt. Like, these guys are super cool, and they raise the stakes. That's why we called it Rising Tides, because the stakes for everyone is raised.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you're making these new factions, right, and you sort of have the figurehead, you have Duncan, and he's this blue-collar worker. How many iterations does he go through? Does somebody just sort of get it right on the first go-around, or the couple go-arounds, or do you have 10 different versions of him that you've drawn up before you landed on the final one?
It's different every character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we usually start with sort of a personality style. Like, this guy's going to be about aquatic stuff, so he's going to be a sailor or nautical themed. And all right, we're going to break. He's going to be an admiral. No, he's going to be more like a deckhand. No, he's going to be more like a longshoreman. And then so we hone in on the character.
Mm-hmm.
And then the artist will take that and they'll just find ways of expressing that visually. And we may or may not have more cues. My family's Scottish by heritage, so I insisted that he be Scottish.
He pulled the lead designer card.
Yeah. And after that, we roamed around different body types of stuff, and we hit on looks like Michael Clark Duncan, really really heavy set dude with the broken nose, and fleshed out his backstory a little bit. So he actually came to life pretty quickly because we had a lot of pretty clear direction. But then a character like Lena Ebner from Integer, who's our new leader, we're much more free form because her character she's a political activist, sort of a party politics maverick that could go anywhere. And so it really was just going around the room with all the other creative people and saying, how does this speak to you? What do you see? And so that one goes through lots and lots of iterations until there's a character that just kind of springs forth that hits it for everybody.
For a character like that, when it is more free form and you can go in so many different directions, do you like use somebody as a point of reference, or is it just sort of an amalgamation of different qualities you'd want them to represent?
Sometimes. I mean, that's kind of how we guide the design process. We sit in the art meetings, and of course we give critique sometimes, but we generally are hands off after we've given over our sort of sheet. We have a write-up of the character we want, and then maybe some reference, like a range of characters that this person could fall into.
Yeah.
And our artists know the game just as well as we do, and so we're often on very similar, if not the same wavelength, and we get on a track that we like very early. But we give like a lot of photo reference and YouTube
Character
clips and characters and stuff from movies or whatever, and then just see what happens. Cool. It's really cool. It's like when you make a game like Civ with so much stuff in it. We're working hard on our systems. We're writing code all day, and then the rest of the game gets made underneath us. It's like magic. You come in one morning and you sync Perforce, and you're like, "Oh my God, look at that thing! They just dropped in the game. It's amazing." Yeah. It's cool. It's a very cool process.
Well, I'm looking at boats. So we got seaside stuff happening here. We got boats, floating around on water. So you mentioned this is a big change coming to Civ. Did it? Why now specifically with this one expansion? Was this something that the timing worked out as far as like how much time you've put into this project, or did this fit so well with maybe where you wanted the story to go with Civ, and what was kind of the genesis behind Seafaring?
I think Seafaring came mostly from a desire to push the systematic change. Like we really want the game to play differently. The story drove a lot of things like the artifacts and the quests, and certainly the new leaders, and was maybe half responsible for diplomacy. Aquatic gameplay came from a desire to take all the traditional strategies and modes of playing Civ and wrench them. Really capture the sci-fi future context. What can Beyond Earth do that no historic game can do? It can let you build cities that float and that sail around. Like, it's the future, we can make these. So that radically changes every core strategy of the game. Like when water is not just in the way on your way to another continent, when there's resources and enemies and cities and things out there to fight over, when navies are every bit as important as land armies, when the whole surface of the planet is up for grabs, everything changes. You can't ignore the oceans. Even if you never build a water city, it'll matter a huge deal to your game that other people are. So water gameplay was there to take the game to a new place, a place that Civ had never been before, to an extent it had not been for, to really reach for the sci-fi premise of what Beyond Earth could do, and just to have some fun. Like, I'm personally a big fan of ships and naval history, and it was a lot of fun to take the traditional gameplay of Civ and say, all right, how should this be carried over onto the water? But most importantly, how should it be different? We wanted them to be seamless so that you could easily play on both, have a hybrid waterland Civ without much trouble. But that the tactical thinking, the sort of obstacles you would consider going through on that, would be very different. So there'd be a lot of finesse, a lot of relearning, a lot of new fun to be had in figuring out how to be a master water Civ. And so that's where water gameplay came from.
Do you see yourself, Ben, pouring a bunch of time into testing that stuff out purely just from a review journalist standpoint? Whereas if you weren't reviewing the game, you're like, I might dabble in that if I feel like it.
I mean, it's like they were saying. I mean, it's kind of hard to ignore. It's like what advantage do I have, even as just a casual player, to completely ignore the water stuff, right? Like, and you sort of learn by interacting with other things. It's like, okay, this guy has this amazing water facility. He's built all these cool new units, and they're destroying me. Maybe I should do the same thing, you know? And it is a very much you use your experience to kind of to play better. Mm-hmm. So a thing that I went through, and I bet others have gone through it too, is I have to be honest, when you guys initially announced Rising Tide, I was like, okay, so you can build cities on the water. That's cool. How does this really change the game? And once I got my hands on it, I had a much better understanding. And like you were saying, it's this rippling effect where it really does affect every single decision you make. But that's kind of a tough sell, I think. How do you communicate those systematic changes to people, and how do you get them excited about it?
Well, it was a tricky needle to thread, I think, because we didn't want to, as David said, we wanted it to be mechanically distinctive, but not so different that you had to learn a completely new set of rules to play on water. But at the same time, we didn't want the water tiles to just be blue land, right? To make it interesting. And we went around the room a lot trying to figure out how to do this. Lots and lots of iteration. We weren't really getting there. We weren't hitting it. And finally, Dave comes in one morning and he writes cities fucking move on the whiteboard. And
I really can't take credit. The idea just bubbled up kind of simultaneously.
Yeah, it came from a lot of
bunch
different places,
places.
But that was it. So cities usually grow, that their territory grows by culture. So you amass culture, your border grows out, your population can work new tiles, etc. City borders on the water don't grow at all. They have to be manually grown either by buying tiles or by just moving your entire city. So the cities float. So this opens up a whole slew of cool strategic possibilities when you learn just that one simple rule. And we're always looking for opportunities to change the game like that. Like if you change this one thing, all of a sudden it's a whole new ball game.
And that's kind of how it sells. Like when we announced, I think it was at PAX, we were describing water gameplay, and we said cities travel. They travel around the oceans. All of the journalists we talked to immediately stopped asking journalistic questions and started asking strategy questions. Like, okay, so does that mean that territories? All right, so does that mean if I use my city strike, if I got a navy, if I sail up to a land coast, does that mean how close can I get? Like you could see their brains were going through the ripple effect. Like, how does everything I used to do no longer work the same way? Now that I can't take this for granted anymore. So it's when you see that effect, then you know you've got the right.
Can you see that moment just
right
wash
source.
over Ben's
Yeah.
face where he just immediately transforms from like the Civ player to the Civ journalist? That's really good. That's like the official headline of our review. Like when we
Yeah.
put up, the main image on our site, to direct people to review, cities fucking move.
Yeah.
It's like that's
Cities
exclamation
fucking move.
point.
Yep.
That's the name of the review, no question. We should probably direct things. We're gearing up towards the end of the show. Mike Huber, you prepped with questions.
I got some questions.
You got some questions. We have questions from Mike Huber. Are you guys ready?
We're ready.
Questions.
Bring
All
them
right.
on.
And remember, Mike Huber is asking the questions, and the questions that we like, you guys will get a code for Goat Simulator on PlayStation 4, which you can play in anticipation of Rising Tide.
I've just first one, start off really quick, super yes or no question. Can you rename units' names?
No.
I wish you could.
No.
The turnover for units is such that that you lose them pretty quickly. It's not like XCOM where you can hang on to a particular unit for a long time. It's a good idea, not a feature in the game, unfortunately.
Cool. That was from 8 feet. Okay. Next, I like Narwhal.
Me too.
They want to know or he wants to know if you guys like Paper Mario, the Thousand Year Door.
Yes.
I never played it.
See, there's always one. You know you're going to get one of them. Do you have a game? So yours is Final Fantasy VI. Do you have a game that this nut hasn't played, and you're just like, all right, when you played this game?
Well, my favorite game of all time is Colonization.
Oh,
Which I
okay.
had to demo to Will. 'Cause he'd never
Yeah,
heard of it.
Dave had to sit me down and
Let me explain how every strategy game made in the last 25 years is based on
and
colonization.
now basically we crib everything from Brian Reynolds' Colonization, the original DOS game. If you play that game,
Wow.
that's like our playbook, man.
Colonization? Have you
never
tried
played
that?
it.
All
Tell me,
right, there we go.
It's awesome. It's
I
really
feel like I need to go like immediately after this.
I'm also capable of playing shooters, and Will is incapable.
I'm incapable of shooters. I'm the guy that's like looking up into the ceiling the whole time, trying to. I'm a strategy game player, guys. Like
Well,
the console
The
shooter
next
thing.
time we have Nintendo on the show, we'll ask them if they have played Colonization. We'll see.
There you go.
Next up, from CDJ Gamer, I love the end game in Beyond Earth. How will Rising Tide affect it?
Well, a lot of in lots of ways. First of all, it's not a lot snappier. It looks much cooler. So we did a lot to polish up the end game and make it really kind of like this climax moment of the game. Plus,
They're movies that play finally. It's not just like a pop up that
it's
you
like,
get.
hey, thanks for
Thank
playing.
kind of a letdown.
Win skate straight.
We heard you. Don't worry. We fixed
Like,
it.
game over. You have won. Enter your 3 initials. No, and then there's been a lot of balance changes that really lead, because with the new hybrid affinities, with the aquatic cities, with the 4 other factions and their different sort of abilities, and the fact that diplomacy is always there mixing things up, the run up to a victory is a lot more challenging in some ways, but also you can be a lot more powerful doing it. So there's a lot of new strategies to be found for how to go for victory in the game.
Also, I would say that the victory pursuit by the AI is much better. A lot of work.
Competition is better.
Yeah, a lot of work in the expansion has gone into making the AI just all around stronger. Things from big things like following the victory paths to little things like how your workers are automated and the things that they decide to build. These, so little annoyance, pet peeve kind of things, all the way to these big things, these big ticket AI items.
That's something that's actually kind of unique to Civilization, is because the games go on for quite a while. The little pet peeve things over multiple games eventually become huge problems. So
Right.
to see those things be addressed is super nice.
Cool. We got 2 more. On Hurius, does the dev team look at or get inspired by community mods? Has any talent been poached from modders?
First one is a definite yes.
Yeah.
Like there are definitely some mods that I was really impressed by, and have inspired balance changes or other major moves. And they try to do things that we decided not to try to do for whatever reason. And oftentimes the solutions that they have come up with, because they have no better mechanism, can be really innovative. Like if they're like, all I have at my disposal is Lua and text, how do I express this idea in the game? And they come up with a way. And so they'll say, maybe that's not how we would do it, but now that we see what is possible, it goes somewhere that neither us nor the modders would have thought of, and is even better. Cool. So we get lots of inspiration from mods.
It's like the most direct way for our community to talk to us, except mean tweets to me or to Dave. It's the most direct way. It's like, this bothers me so much, or I'm so passionate about this, I'm going to make it. I'm going to show you, I'm going to make it. And we look at all the mods. In fact, the tech tree got an overhaul in the game. Like the way that it's the UI for the tech tree is largely inspired by one of the most popular mods on Steam. So a lot more color, more information, is easier to read, more filters, things like that. So yeah, we'll definitely look at the mods all the time. And I don't think we've hired anybody on staff that's a modder, but we have this like really intense testing group called Frankenstein. And I think there are several modders in that group that we've tapped.
Cool. And lastly, Banana Forklift Killer. He was saying that you guys were saying that you think the strategy genre is in a renaissance, but he feels like it seems like less companies are taking risks, especially with Command & Conquer being canceled, and that they're relying more on Kickstarter. How does that make you feel about the future of strategy games?
That's a long question.
This question bothers me.
That's your final question.
That's a good one, right?
Boom.
I think
I'm upset by this.
I think it's true that some people become more risk averse when it comes to strategy games, but then you have publishers like Paradox, which continue to publish very niche products that are extremely good, very refined, and then Kickstarter is not a bad thing. It can be bad, but it's also sort of like Darwinistic almost. Like there's a lot of ideas out there.
It's the Wild West.
It's the Wild West, right? The Wild West. It's like the 80s. Video games in the 80s were like the Wild West, and that's where we got the most innovation. The genres were sort of solidified in that period, and I see that is happening now. And you see a lot of really cool riffs on games. Like we were at PAX and we saw a game called Hard West, which is like an XCOM game. It's cool because like XCOM's a genre now. Awesome. It's like an XCOM game with sort of Cormac McCarthy Western setting, and you could ricochet bullets and stuff. It looked really cool, but like
I backed it on Kickstarter.
Oh yeah. Okay.
yeah, I mean,
Wow.
it looks awesome. So
Ian Hank's stamp of approval.
When does it come out? Do you know?
I have no idea, but it was playable at PAX. It looked really good. But anyway,
Oh.
like that kind of stuff, and Armello, which was made by a team of like 30 people,
love that game,
distributed
Praxis.
all over the world. We love that game.
League of Geeks. I want to see what they do next.
Yep, they're doing great things. Hero Generations, like all of these small, medium, and large strategy games, it runs the whole spectrum. So you have Paradox on one end, and then the little guys on the other, and everything in between, and a lot of innovation.
It's something that we struggle to communicate sometimes. There's this amongst some people, and it's not everybody, but amongst some people, there's this idea that if games aren't coming out from big publishers, then the genre is dead. And there's still people that have this stipulation about Kickstarter, but it's like, no, some of the best games that I've played in the last 12 months came from Kickstarter. They came from these one-man teams, these 10-man teams, whatever they are. And that sort of mentality that, if it doesn't come out of a box, it's bad, just drives me up a wall. I can't stand it.
Well, I mean, but if you were one of these guys, you certainly would hope that something like Rising Tide would be great and would bring more people to Beyond Earth and get more people potentially like myself who's doesn't play a lot of strategy games into the genre, and then okay, well I finished Rising Tide. What else is out there? What else can I back on Kickstarter? What else can I be involved in? So maybe it's less about like a dearth of good quality games for me to play, but how much when I scroll through Twitter, how much am I seeing headlines for strategy games? How much is the genre actually being talked about right now?
And people
So
have
maybe
asked
that's
us if
concerns
we're
people have.
sort of threatened by that. Like if Firaxis You know, if we're scared of these indies or these new products out
You don't
there,
seem scared.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's great. Like to be making games in this time when strategy games are so popular is awesome. Like as we lower the cost of entry to make games in the first place, strategy games are a great option because you can't in your basement make the next Call of Duty or the next like linear first person action game. It's just too content heavy. But you can make a strategy game. You know, it's like it can be as simple as a board game or as complex as Civ and everything in between. So
Yeah, like some of our favorite games were extremely pure ideas. Like, I absolutely adore Monument Valley, which was like a puzzle game. And then there was this weird one that was very similar by one guy called Rimmed Capsule. You remember that? It's really, really weird little
I
iPhone
played
game.
that.
Yeah.
I played
Yeah.
that. I like
Almost
that
nobody's
game.
heard of it, but it's really clever. And I think that's really exciting just I think for all of game design or all game designers, because strategy games, especially ones like these, because they're sort of free from the need to be, I don't know, veristic. You know, they don't have to have realistic physics. They don't have to have first-person cameras. They don't have to have lots of character animation. They can explore ideas in a very pure way, and that's where the ideas get forged. That's where they come from. Like, we take inspiration from these little indie games. You know, I remember we met the guy that made FTL, and we told him that Sid Meier likes his game, which he does, and he couldn't speak. And so that was like just a magical moment. Like, that's what strategy games are like an inclusive and inviting genre. They're a leveling playing field where everybody wants to be part of it. So yeah, I sympathize with your disappointment that strategy games feel maligned because the big guys don't push them out as fast, but it's far from true. Definitely be a voice for sanity in that.
Yeah, and speaking of, you not pushing out something fast, I mean, there's just no way. Like, you were talking about mods, exploring things that you guys don't necessarily have the time or the like, we're not going to focus on that beforehand. We're focusing on this stuff. I mean, I can't imagine testing a game like this because it's something you gotta go through the whole darn thing. I mean, is there any way,
Those
to
are
like
the
piece
testers.
out certain sections of the game, or is it just kind of
no,
like start from
these
scratch
are the
and just go
unsung
see what
heroes.
happens?
These guys are without our testing group back home, and without Frankenstein, these games don't get shipped. Like we said, we don't get to play the game that often. We're writing the code that makes it go. Our producers play the game. Our testers play the game. They're amazing. They know it so well, and our fans too. Like, so much of what we do is watching people play, and sometimes that can be heartbreaking, right? Because you're looking at somebody and you're like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I wanted to fix that, but but then you get to roll up with an expansion like Bert. We call it Bert. And just address these things, fix some things, add all of this new stuff, and hopefully make the community really happy.
Will Ernie be the next expansion, or is that just a
If you
different?
can figure out how to make if you can figure out how to make that acronym work.
We're in games. We love acronyms.
Well, yeah. So when is Rising Tide actually happening? You guys have lots of stuff actually coming
it's
up.
available for pre-order now.
Okay.
I think it's even on discount.
10% off. Yeah.
But it'll be out for really real on October 9th.
Which is coming up. You were getting pumped for Firaxicon, which is coming up as well.
Yeah, a week before.
Oh, okay, cool.
My dream for Firaxicon is just to like go and eat food with people and talk about strategy games for like 3 hours.
That's
'cause
basically what it is.
Yeah, I mean, when else do you get to do that throughout the year?
That's exactly what it is.
So.
Is there anything else specifically that you guys want to talk about that people can look forward to, other than obviously the game itself?
We had an awesome time making the game. We think everyone's really going to enjoy it. And thank you so much for having us in here to talk about it in such depth. And thanks to the community for those great questions.
Well, some pretty good questions. I was digging.
Yeah.
Those were pretty pointed. You selected them also, Huber. Thank you so much for
I
going
know,
through the
and
questions.
I had to cut some too that were also good.
I'm going to talk really quickly about some stuff that's coming up on GD before we wrap up. But I am curious because we haven't, sometimes we specifically break into the actual gameplay, but we're kind of a cautious bird's eye view. What do we think so far of our playthrough? How is?
Well, Jess has been playing the game back there.
How's she doing?
She's actually been doing a pretty good job. I've been sort of paying attention. She's got
Can
at
you
least
tell?
two cities going on. We've got, I don't know. Let's see.
A lot of exploration.
A lot of exploration.
A little bit of diplomacy.
Yeah.
I think she's gonna have an alien problem pretty soon.
Is that something, Ben? Do you?
That's what you think.
Can you tell, Ben? Can you guys just kind of approach a game, 10, 20 hours in, just like, oh yeah, okay, I see what's happening, or is it so complex that even just kind of like looking at it from from
Oh,
bird's eye, from
I-
God's view? Like,
Sometimes yes, depends on how late it is, but
If you're doing really badly, well, you can tell.
oh sure, okay.
we know the game really well, so I can usually take a game in any situation and figure out where to go with it.
Well, thank you so much for demoing the game. I appreciate you playing that in the background. Just really quick, stuff that is coming up this week on GT. So we streamed on YouTube for the first time this week. We got done YouTube Gaming to give that a go. Some people were concerned that we were going to make the full switch over to YouTube. We're still streaming on Twitch, like you are currently watching us now on Twitch. If you guys stop by at 6 p.m. Pacific time every day, Monday through Friday, for our Twitch streams, those aren't going anywhere. You can still find us at those times on Twitch every day, every week, including tomorrow, where Daniel Bloodworth will be playing some Forza Motorsport 6. He is finishing up that review. I'm finishing up the Super Mario Maker review. That'll be on the site tomorrow. And Mr. Huber is pumped to do some Zombie Viking 4-player co-op on Friday.
Right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. Fired up about that game. So,
Pumped.
so hopefully I will be around for that. If not, I hope you find 2 or 3 other people and make that happen. As I mentioned, big reviews: Forza Motorsport 6, Super Mario Maker, Destiny: The Taken King coming very shortly from Mr. Huber. He's going to be working on that this week and this weekend. And we just did a just played on your experience in the Crucible during that event for The Taken King. Top 10 Dogs, which we talked and debated about, is coming this weekend.
Potentially Wales.
Potentially Wales is coming up soon. We'll definitely alert you guys when that comes in for your hopeful suggestions. New episodes of Final Bossman, Huber Hype, mandatory update. I'm on both Final Bossman and Huber Hype this week,
Nice.
which never happens, but I'm on both of those
Double
episodes
dip.
this week. Tabletop comes back.
It's been like 4 months.
It's
since
been a
Tabletop
long
Adventures.
time
Yeah.
since we've
It's
been able to talk about
crazy.
Tabletop Adventures.
It's a good one.
But on the
a
new
good one.
stage, our sit-down D&D tabletop crew is coming back.
Cool.
Do you
And
guys play Dungeons and Dragons? I have to know.
Actually,
one of them does, the other doesn't. They both do?
Dave is a really good DM. He's a very good DM. He ran a game of Adventure, which is this
Little-known
old
White Wolf game.
sort of White Wolf game.
Yeah. But the short answer is yeah. Now and then.
Of course.
If,
I mean,
if you ever get a free hour to kill and you want to stop by the office to guest DM,
Well, you know we
The
live
next
like
time, yeah.
on the other side of the country. Right?
The next
Well-
time they're in town, you're going
Hey.
straight to the airport. There's no time now.
I'm
But,
just
I
saying the
appreciate
offer's
the
the offer's
invitation.
Yeah,
open.
put that in. Yeah, if you guys get here an hour early next time, then we'll, an hour and a half early. And Nicole Z was, who's a friend of Elise Williams. The two of them sat down to talk about the new DLC that is coming to Dragon Age Inquisition, and did their own very conversational preview of that. So we appreciate her coming in. And like I said, we're streaming on YouTube now, so check us out, youtube.com/game trailers on YouTube Gaming. And you never know, in the afternoon we'll pop up with a crazy stream. Destiny, the new patch popped up, so we thought it was an opportune time to come in. But if we were going to do some bonus streams, we might show up on Twitch, we might show up on YouTube. We're feeling that out. And that is the show. Thank you guys so much for coming in,
This was
man.
awesome.
I really
Thanks a lot.
appreciated it. Do we get through everything? There's a lot to talk about with the
No, no,
expansion.
it's-
Is there anything else you sure before we wrap things up?
I think we
There's nothing
covered
we
it.
missed. Good. Well, the expansion is coming, so you guys can check that out. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and we will see you next week for another GT Live. Take care, everybody.
Bye.